Lightsaber combat is the third part of the triangle that makes up the lightsaber as an idea. There are several disciplines to this art, but short of a single book on the subject from the perspective of Sindralig, little detail is given to the art of fighting with a lightsaber within these treatises. So, to wrap up everything you need to know about the lightsaber, we're going to break down and analyse all 7 forms of lightsaber combat. It's important to classify some things first. While training, Padawans would study lightsaber velocities, combinations of choreographed movements and strikes to familiarise the student in the particular form, similar to shadow or mirror boxing. And rehearsing these movements alone while envisioning the presence of an opponent was called Julon. A form, also known as a discipline or a treatise, was a specific martial style or interpretation that contained a series of integral, defining velocities with the goals and spirit of the form inspiring the users to create their own movements and techniques that fit within that spirit. Lightsaber combat is the general term given to any variety of fighting that involves a lightsaber. With that out of the way, we'll start with Form 1. Form 1, also known as Shii-Cho, the Way of the Sarlacc, or the Determination form, is the oldest and most widely studied form of lightsaber combat. It's the first of the Jedi treatises to be codified during the transition from metal swords to their iconic energy weapons. As its namesake would suggest, it's an entrenched and stationary form of combat, similar to how powerful a Sarlacc is once it's formed its burrow, with its single point of weakness also being the centre point of attack. Kit Fisto is probably the most notable user of Form 1, and if we examine his use of the form, the basic principles of Shii-Cho are quite clear. It's preferred for offensive strikes to be delivered from a powerful, stationary guard, and for the movements to be deliberate and swift. These are not, however, lethal attacks, rather attempts at nullifying the opponent's ability to continue by disarming the opponent. For defensive technique, a much more mobile tactic is employed, with the user taking advantage of space and surroundings to maintain an erratic, unpredictable circle around an opponent to avoid coming to blows on their terms. When the hand is forced, however, and the wielder does make contact with an opponent's attack, the defensive strikes are random and kinetic, almost clumsy, to keep an opponent's focus divided between their immediate action and any follow-ups. Whether attacking or defending, the determination form is very aptly named, with proponents of this discipline using space to their advantage, taking time to reset, and exploiting whatever gaps they can at random until a moment of conclusion is reached. In Master Fisto's case, he's humble enough to know when stopping is a smarter play than continuing, and so he retreats. This form, however, lacks a great deal of refinement present in the other disciplines, and the opportunistic nature of the form renders it useless against an opponent that won't present any opportunities unless pushed to do so. Form 2, otherwise known as Makashi, the Way of the Ysalimiri, or the Contention form, is the logical follow-up to Form 1. Where Shii-Cho is characterised by determined, erratic strikes with the hope of one finding the mark and ending the duel, Makashi is characterised by measured, surgical movement and knowing that a single strike will find its mark. Form 1 is broad, sweeping and clumsy. Form 2 is elegant, precise and accurate. Named for the force-resistant reptilians, the Ysalimiri, the Contention form is very much a refinement of Shii-Cho, integrating force manipulation in contest. It demonstrates the expertise of a wielder, with Count Dooku's use of jabs and lunges seeming far more effective and fluid than the random, wild flurries of Form 1. As you can see, Dooku waits for Anakin to be preoccupied before re-engaging, and all the while that he's battling 2 proficient duelists. He is relaxed, confident, and able to transition effortlessly between offense and defense within his footwork. He expertly avoids disarmament and incorporates blocking into retreating instead of blindly running away. Makashi probably best represents the idea that swordplay is like a dance, with delicate, precise footwork propping up deliberate, calculated strikes between a constant, fluid defense. The great weakness of the most dueling-centric form is its inability to land kinetic power on an opponent. So even as the Count expertly parries Kenobi and Skywalker and deflects the Pike's blaster fire, he's never delivered enough of a hit to force them to reset, and so falls back on a well-placed kick to the chest or the force. That said, wielders of lesser skill to Dooku would struggle employing Makashi against blaster fire also, as it simply isn't accommodating of that kind of engagement. The third form, Soresu, also referred to as the Way of the Mynock, or the Resilience form, was an altogether defensive discipline. The Mynock is not a particularly flattering likeness, owing to its parasitic nature, but the relationship is less to do with nature over ability. Mynocks are able to endure some of the most inhospitable circumstances in the galaxy, making them notably resilient creatures. That's the similarity to Soresu, because when mastered, Experts in Form 3 have an almost impenetrable defense line against blasters and lightsabers. Obi-Wan Kenobi is by far the best example we have for mastery of Form 3. And against a variety of opponents, disciplines and circumstances, we see the same steadfast defensive moves that preface a counter-strike using another form's velocity. When he fought the Ascendant Darth Vader on Mustafar, he allowed himself to remain on the back foot for the entirety of the fight, having to block constant, savage attacks from his former apprentice. And this belies the principal theme of Form 3. Patience. An aggressive enemy will tire eventually. A blaster will run out of charge with time, but Form 3 is resilient and long-lasting, and it endures. It's almost a mirroring technique, where each movement is determined by what the opponent's attack is. This scene shows you a little bit of that, with Vader and Kenobi almost tick-tocking as the fight progresses. That said, Vader's Form 5 looks to have Kenobi constantly on the edge of defeat, and although he may be a little overwhelmed by this rage-enhanced opponent, he never slips. Though Anakin is dominant in the fight, he never really lands anything of consequence against his master, and Kenobi's patience pays off. He does attempt to attack here and there, but Vader's defense outclasses Kenobi's attack, and at one point he literally has him by the throat. But Kenobi waits and waits, and then Vader makes a blunder that costs him the fight, and several limbs. Form 3 is the defensive form, whether that's against a lightsaber or a hail of blaster fire. It's the go-to for anyone that needs to cover themselves or their allies. Form 4, Ataru, or the Way of the Hawkbat, or the aggression form. That alone should reveal the speed, energy, and ferocity that characterize this form. It's strictly an offensive discipline, with very little in the way of defensive choreography. If one can't continue an attack with Ataru, then acrobatically disengaging and re-engaging are the closest maneuvers to a defense contained in this discipline. In essence, it's a combination of principles from Form 1 and Form 2 for those that have a particularly acute power in the Force. Ostentatious and kinetic strikes, devastatingly accurate and supreme blade control, contained within highly acrobatic and unpredictable jumps, slides, rolls, and spins. Master Yoda is not only a notable proponent of Form 4, but probably its greatest modern practitioner. Though unassuming in stature and frail by impression, in combat he's lightning fast, dynamic, and overwhelming when on the offense. His intensity shoos Dooku off after he effortlessly dismantles Kenobi and Skywalker, and he manages to fight Sidious to a stalemate. Windu's skill, the savagery of the Knight Brothers, the combined talents of Fisto, Tin, and Kolar. None of them compare to Sidious. But Yoda, the Grand Master fights fire with fire, and the two are pretty much even, which is one hell of an accolade. It's instantly recognisable for its rapid, athletic use of space and pernicious offensive strikes, and it's popular among so many Jedi for its effectiveness, fluid nature, and adaptability. Like the Hawkbat it's named for, Ataru is a powerful offensive tool with a great scope for intensity, versatility, and speed. The one huge failing of this form is its lack of defensive measures, and though Jedi might lead into contests with this form, they would often fall back on defensive forms like Soresu when on the back foot. Form 5 has two variations: the standard grip with a single blade, known as Djiem-So, and a more unorthodox reverse grip, often with dual blades, known as Shien. Though the purposes and lineages of the two forms may differ, they are very similar in practice. The design of these two disciplines seeks to correct and enhance the failings of Form 3, which we know is offensive capability. Both of these forms are characterized by a simple, less acrobatic style and a strict three-part velocity wherein the series of moves leads with a powerful kinetic blow, grounded in Form 1, a retreat into solid, adaptable defensive position, taken from Form 3, and a swift, calculated counterattack lifted straight out of Form 2. It is otherwise known as the Perseverance form, which is justified by this tripartite approach to sabercraft. Your initial move is designed to throw off your opponent, to force them into reacting either with an attack or a retreat. By slipping immediately into your defensive stance, you both cover yourself from the attack and prepare yourself to advance safely if they retreat. The opponent will likely strike you in either event, but it gives you time to analyse their strategy and produce an appropriate counter. Like the mighty Krayt dragon, with its fierce complement of teeth and tough, leathery hide, Form 5 promotes harmony between offense and defense. It is noted by many that the emphasis on forward momentum risks overly aggressive sentiment, and both Shien and Djiem-So struggle to overcome the forms dedicated to either defense, as seen with Kenobi's Form 3 frustrating Vader on Mustafar, or offense, as seen with Saesee Tin's complete inability to strike against Sidious's Form 7. Form 6 was colloquially referred to as the Diplomat's form, but its true titles are the Moderation form, or the Way of the Rancor, or simply as Niman. The reason for its colloquial moniker lies in its basis being a compromise of the 5 preceding disciplines. Many experts in sabercraft have cited that to tackle all of the weaknesses of the 5 forms, you leave no room to fully realise the strengths of the other disciplines, a sort of jack of all trades but master of none. But it is true that master of none is oftentimes better than master of one. Niman gives its users familiarity with all of the other forms and their core velocities, meaning you're better prepared against an opponent that has only mastered Makashi, because you can rely on the intensity of Ataru or the impregnable guard of Soresu to counteract it. Maul employed this discipline to great effect against Obi-Wan Kenobi, using his knowledge of the Jedi arts to subvert and frustrate Kenobi's fight pattern. However, the nature of that requires a great deal of knowledge and practice if you hope to truly master it. Battle masters of the Jedi Order, or highly studious or scholarly individuals, were the most common users of the Moderation form. Unlike most other forms, it had a relaxed attitude to blade work, and focused more on incorporation of all things in the Jedi arsenal, like force manipulations such as telekinetic pulls or throws. In effect, Niman was orientated to fixing the many flaws in its ancestor forms, and while this substantially increased the adaptability of the technique, it relied on the creativity and ingenuity of the user to make it truly effective. Otherwise, it was a discipline that benefited from no real advantage, for the sake of having no major drawback either. Form 7, or Juyo, and its variations like Vaapad, constitute the most aggressive, wild, and dangerous of the lightsaber disciplines. Referred to as the Ferocity form, or the Way of the Vornskr, it is as imposing in name as it is devastating in battle. So called for the canine predator that preyed on the Ysalimiri using the Force. This form was often employed by Force sensitives to pick apart and savage opponents, though it was no more effective against Makashi as it was any other form. Key principles of this discipline were intensity and power. Lending itself very well to the Sith doctrines, Form 7 employed bold strikes like Shii-Cho, Ataru, and Djiem-So, but unlike the others, they were not employed as standalone movements. Rather, Form 7 was a series of elaborate, powerful, vicious strikes executed with the intention of breaking an opponent. It's highly unpredictable, making it very tough to counter with any of the more patient disciplines. But because it's so intense and so aggressive, even offensive treatises such as Ataru are easily overwhelmed. Darth Sidious is by far the most competent and successful user of this form. His distaste for lightsabers didn't stop him charging down and slaughtering 3 well-established Jedi Masters in seconds. It was limited by the Jedi because viciousness was very much a dark side behaviour, and only Yoda's Ataru could stand up to it. But his inherently aggressive form still wasn't enough to overcome the Sith's Juyo. Vaapad, however, does get the better of Sidious in the sense that it redirects a lot of the dark side energy back at him, effectively shining a mirror in the face of the savage duelist and knocking his focus. The moves of this form were largely corruptions or variations of those in the 5 main treatises, injected with greater aggression and ferocity than usual. If the goal is to kill your opponent, Form 7 is at the pinnacle of lethality for lightsaber combat. Once you've selected the materials and style of your hilt, and installed a kyber crystal imbued with your unique personality, and studied for years to hone and master your chosen discipline of sabercraft, you've completed your journey into Jedi or Sith. You now understand the symbol, recognise the power, and know everything you need to about the lightsaber. Right then, you lovely lot, if you've made it this far, and you've been here through all 3 parts of the series, I'd like to say a massive thank you. Thank you for being here, thank you for giving me your time, and thank you for any likes, comments or criticisms that you've given me. This has been such an enjoyable journey for me so far, and I hope that you feel more informed on not just what and why, but also the meanings and implications of everything that we've looked at. I'd love for everyone to tell me about their lightsaber in the comments below. Describe it to me. What does it look like? What shape is the hilt? What materials have you made it out of? What colour is your blade? And how would you use it? You guys have probably got some of the coolest lightsaber design ideas anywhere in the fandom, so share them with us. I'll be replying to all of you that do show me what you've got, and that offer goes for all of you watching, even if you're new here. And if you are, I also want to say welcome to the StarWarsObserver. This community is a place for anyone and everyone that's passionate about the galaxy far, far away, and wants somewhere to enjoy it with like-minded people. So if that's you, then go ahead and subscribe. Join the community and let us know what you think. Love to all of you watching. See you soon.